Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Caregiver College. Caregiver College is a bi-weekly online educational program series in partnership with the University of Alabama at Birmingham's Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, CODI Core, or Community Outreach Diversity and Inclusion Core. The series is co-hosted by yours truly, Celine Atkins. This is an online education series that is primarily targeted towards younger first-time millennial caregivers, but the resources and information from these short videos can benefit caregivers of all ages and experiences. So each episode, we're going to hear from aging and caregiver researchers, caregivers, and/or community activists and leaders to share their experiences, insights, and provide resources to caregivers of all ages. So our guest today is Dr. Fawn Cothran from the University of California, Davis. Dr. Cothran, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and the important work that you're doing?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. So yes, I am Dr. Fawn Cothran. I'm an assistant professor of nursing at the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing in the Family Caregiving Institute. And my work focuses on African American or Black dementia family caregivers. And actually more recently, my work has evolved into looking at stress and resilience in Black caregivers over time. And actually, this is a personal journey for me because Alzheimer's disease runs in my family. So this work is very important, and I've been doing it a long time.
That's great. I think that's so needed because when I think about how the population of aging adults are only going to increase, I think there's a lot to be said in terms of, who is going to care for these aging loved ones. I think that it's kind of a transitional and sometimes challenging process, especially, for the younger generation caregivers. So I really admire the work that you do, and that is part of why we reached out to you to kind of get your insight.
Well, again, thank you. And I'm happy to share whatever I've learned and whatever I can do to help other caregivers as well. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about, your journey, both personal and academic. So now let's kind of get into a few questions. So in your experience as a caregiving researcher scholar, as well as a caregiver yourself, what do you find has been the narrative about African American caregivers and self-care, or even more broadly, African Americans and self-care in general?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question and an important one because from what I had seen, self-care hasn't really been the focus of the work that I've seen. There's a lot of descriptive work that talks about the health consequences, particularly mental health consequences of caregiving, but we don't really see a whole lot on what's happening with Black caregivers. There's a lot of intervention work on skills and self-efficacy, but again, the self-care piece hasn't quite come through as much. And so the work that I do now is really looking at ways to to try to emphasize how can we shift this to start paying attention to not just describing and not just looking at mental health, but also physical health, and how can we improve health of caregivers?
There's this narrative of kind of like caregivers, especially African American female caregivers, are supposed to do it all. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to do it all. We're supposed to manage it all. We're supposed to keep, pushing, but there are, like you were saying before, health ramifications, for that, which actually kind of ties into, my next question to kind of delve this a little bit more. What do you think in terms of the relationship that African Americans have, or African American caregivers have, between this notion of and practice of self-care in terms of maybe being a possible buffer with the mental health and physical outcomes? So I'm thinking mental health in terms of like caregiver burden, and physical health with, say, chronic stress, migraines, as well as high blood pressure.
Yeah, again, really great questions. So it's funny that you mentioned how, women in particular are expected to do it all. So that whole resilience piece, that whole strong Black woman, that strong superwoman type of mentality, if you will, kind of pushes folks to keep going at the expense of their own self-care, right, or their own health. And so when you mentioned some of the chronic illnesses that are pretty prevalent in our communities, in the African American or Black communities, that is so important to, it is important to care for your family member or that loved family member that you have, but it's also important to care for yourself too. And so that would include, going to those doctor's appointments, getting the treatment for those migraines, making sure that you're exploring, what's happening. And of course, some of the typical types of, things that you hear about in order to take care of yourself, getting sleep and eating right and getting some exercise, all of those things play a role into being able to continue to be a caregiver, but also to maintain your health. Because your health, or as a caregiver, the health of the caregiver is so important in order to continue on that journey. And unfortunately, because of the demands of the role, sometimes, people are trying to do it all by themselves and at the expense of letting everything for themselves go to focus on the individual. And it's unfortunate because caring for self is important, and there is a direct correlation with what we know about being able to care for yourself, take care of yourself, and how that actually impacts your physical health. If you're taking medications and going to appointments, then you're actually able to manage those chronic conditions better. If you are, eating right and exercising, you may be able to better manage your weight, and it also helps you feel better mentally as well as physically. And so those are some of the things that, that there is a benefit to doing them, but we all know that it's hard to do it, but it is so important to do it.
Nails done, or even if not in the vein sense, just go walk around. Walk around my neighborhood for like half an hour, just for me.
And it's not even vanity, right? I mean, that's just taking care of ourselves. Like, do something special for yourself, whatever that looks like for you. Getting your hair done, getting a massage, getting a mani-pedi. Those things, if on the outside it may seem like, oh, this is I can't do this, but those are the things that that kind of help bring that wholeness back to an individual, to a person. And that's so important because self-care looks so different for everyone. And whether it's a massage, whether it is a walk around the block, or whether it is something else, I don't know, painting, for example, whatever that is that brings you a little piece of joy, or brings a caregiver a little piece of joy, there is nothing wrong with that. And I think it's I just love how you put it on the head to me, just in terms of there is nothing wrong with doing what you need to do to bring you joy and to help you to continue on this journey, however that looks.
First part of our conversation with Dr. Cothran. We will be uploading the second part shortly. We hope that this was helpful to you. We hope that you learned a lot. And just like Dr. Cothran says, thank you for doing a little something nice for yourself. Thanks.